Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Administrator Fugate. When Congress passed Biggert Waters a few years ago, homeowners got blindsided by significant rate increases and new flood zone maps. And many of us worked together to design and to draft the Bipartisan Homeowners Flood Insurance Affordability Act, which gave homeowners immediate relief on huge rate increases. And I was glad to be part of that process, but I'm still concerned about the ongoing mapping process. So last week during testimony before the Senate Appropriations Committee, you stated that about 50% of the flood maps are up to date. About 40% need to be reviewed to figure out if they're okay, and about 8 to 10% are clearly out of date and have to be changed. Now, these new flood maps create a lot of difficulties for homeowners in Massachusetts and all around the country. And a particular point of contention has been that the flood maps don't analyze individual homes so that people are swept into flood zone designations based on a general area, not on the risks their home may face if it's a few feet higher or a few feet lower than their neighbors. And this lack of detail often requires homeowners who want to challenge a flood zone designation to have to go out and hire a survey just to be able to tell where they are. So I was very glad to hear you say last week that FEMA's working with engineers to implement a digital mapping technology that will map individual homes and make sure that the flood maps are more accurate. So I just want to be clear on this part. Will this technology mean that FEMA flood designations can go home by home so that each homeowner will know the elevation and therefore their part of the risk that their home faces?
Yes, Senator, that's the goal. What we're talking about doing, we're working and partnering with USGS, the U.S. Geological Survey, and that most of our mapping has always been not structure-based, but just a terrain underneath it. With ground-based LIDAR and other techniques, it's actually possible, and there's been some work done that shows this actually can be cost-effective to shoot an elevation that would show us in most homes what that base flood elevation. I don't think it will be 100% because some structures, even from the outside, you cannot tell what that first floor is, and that's what determines your base elevation. So if you got a partial basement or something, that may be hard to see. But in general, our goal would be to get to the accuracy in the maps where we could most of the time make the determination from the digital elevations without requiring further survey. I don't think it will eliminate it for all cases, but for the majority of them. And it would give us a better tool to rate that risk.
All right, so we'd be going property by property, and that information then would be available to the homeowners.
Exactly.
So if the homeowner wants to say, wait a minute, we're higher than others around here, for example, then they've already got the information in effect for free in this process. Good. So when do you anticipate that the digital mapping technology will be in widespread use by FEMA?
Well, again, we're very much in the pilot phase. We want to make sure that as we go forward with this, we've seen some interesting demonstrations that we think lead us there. That's why we're partnering with USGS, which is our primary national GIS map manager, to go, can we build that elevation? What areas should we do it in? I don't think we can do every part of the country, but certainly where we have populations at risk from flooding. And then what does that look like? And how do we incorporate that into our current maps? Because this is, again, something that will then determine local ordinances of how they build in the future. And the more accurate the maps, the better the outcomes will be.
Oh, fair enough. But the question I asked is, what kind of timetable do you think you have on this?
My experience has been, until I have more information, I couldn't give you the timetable when we'd implement. We are right now working with USGS on the feasibility of looking at some of this and going and saying, does this work? And can we do some pilots to demonstrate it works? And then that will tell us what it would take and how long it takes to roll this out across the country.
Well, what happens in the meantime to people who have been newly designated into flood zones? They think that's not accurate and they want to challenge it.
Well, again, as you pointed out, the process is the flood maps are for the area, not per structure, and they would still have to produce elevation certificates to determine what height they are. And that's something we're looking at. How do we address that in the intermediate stage while we look at where the technology can take us? This technology is probably, I would say right now, proof of concept, another year or two to get to that, and then it would be the implementation. I'm optimistic. Some of the early work says this could be faster than our current techniques, but I'm not sure. So we wanted to do the proof of concept. We want to work with USGS. But to me, the gold standard for mapping is digital elevation maps that are accurate enough to do structure by structure determinations versus I just do the area and then I have to still go back and do survey work to get those base flood elevations.
Well, I appreciate that. And I really want to say here, though, this is a real hardship on people who are newly being designated in these flood zone areas. The costs of coming back and appealing so that you are not required to carry flood insurance that factually you believe you should not have to carry is really important to these families. And so if we see a new way to deal with this on the horizon that would be more accurate, save people money, perhaps reduce the need for appeals, but certainly reduce the cost of the appeals, then I think you have to start thinking about that in terms of what happens to people in the meantime and telling people, well, sorry, our science hasn't caught up, but we're almost on the threshold. But in the meantime, you've either got to spend a lot of money on flood insurance that you may not need or a lot of money challenging flood insurance. Can't be the right place for homeowners. So I urge you to think about what should happen in the interim as you move toward this science, and in the interim, how it is that we better serve families who have newly been added to these flood zones.
We will, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.